Welcome back. This is our 10th show in a series of shows entitled Rehabilitation Coming Soon, where we have been discussing the mass incarceration practices of the United States, and in particular, the effect of those practices on the state of Hawaii. I am Aaron Wills, a William S. Richardson Law School graduate and a consultant for retired Judge Mike Towns' private mediation practice. Over the past 10 weeks, we have heard from people in the community who are willing to discuss the criminal justice system and see the problem of mass incarceration from different perspectives throughout the legal community. Today, we'd like to hear from the perspective of a retired attorney, Bob Merce. Bob Merce has been working since he's been retired on an issue that many people may not be aware of. It's called compassionate release, and we're going to talk to Bob a little bit about compassionate release. Welcome, Bob, to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Aaron.
Well, I just first wanted to ask you, just define what compassionate release is and inform everybody. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there don't even understand what it is.
Okay. Compassionate release refers to is a concept in which prisoners who have been sentenced to usually long prison sentences are released before the expiration of their sentence because they have either a terminal illness or a very debilitating and incurable condition. And so the concept behind it is that it's the right thing to do to release people who are very sick or can't function and put them in a nursing home, which is a much more appropriate place for them than a prison. Because prisons are not nursing homes, and the people who guard inmates are not really qualified to take care of people who are that sick.
Okay. And so is this like, as far as compassionate release is concerned, how many people are we talking about? Is it a very common phenomenon that comes up?
Relatively, yes.
Okay.
I don't know that anybody has ever kept statistics, accurate statistics on it, but it comes up from time to time, mostly with elderly prisoners, but occasionally we'll get somebody who, is diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and or a kidney failure. We have a lot of inmates who have, who are in prison because they have drug problems, and with drug problems comes exposure to hepatitis C virus, and they end up with end-stage liver disease, and we know those people are terminal, and so we try, and the idea is we should let them out and find a place for them so they can die in peace and not die within the prison walls.
Okay. So, you mentioned something about someone being diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. What kind of medical care are they getting if they're an inmate in prison?
Well, it depends. If they're in Arizona, they basically don't get any medical care. I mean, they get minimal medical care, but people have serious illnesses. The state of Hawaii has been bringing them back to Halava, and Halava has an infirmary. And the infirmary is it's good for acute conditions.
Right.
But when you get somebody with, who needs long-term care, who may take a year or a year and a half before their condition becomes, before they actually die, we're not well equipped to take care of those people. And it's very costly to take care of them because end-of-life care, if it's appropriate, is very costly. And we do have a case in the state of Hawaii that says that any prisoner is entitled to exactly the same standard of medical care as somebody who is not in prison. So the burden on the state and the obligation and the duty on the state is to provide these people who are terminal or who have very, very debilitating conditions with appropriate medical care, the same as they would get on the outside. Mm-hmm. And if we're talking end of life, it can be very expensive.
Right. So literally what you're saying is someone who's diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer is not getting any chemotherapy. So the disease is allowed to just progress on its own.
Most of the when it reaches a certain point, they're basically, and everyone is convinced medically that there's nothing more that can be done. Then they become essentially hospice care, and we do have hospice within the state of Hawaii's prison system.
Okay.
But it's and when somebody goes into hospice, they stop. They give them palliative care, but they stop treatment, and the patient, of course, has to consent to that, and then they're basically trying to manage their pain and stuff like that.
And I know there's documented cases out there. I wrote a story about one that you're very familiar with, Delbert Joaquin Icona,
Right.
was a case about compassionate release. And what I found so alarming about that case was Delbert was basically on his deathbed. And the care that he was receiving inside the hospital, he had numerous ailments, but he was basically couldn't move out of his bed. Once he was released under compassionate release, he started getting actual medical care. I seen him up and walking at an event, and he lived for another 2 years. Isn't that right? Or about that
yeah,
long?
about 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes compassionate release such a complicated subject, because well, let me explain the process
Sure,
that we have to go
please.
through to get somebody released through compassionate release. First of all, the Department of Public Safety has to identify the person as somebody who is questionable with respect to compassionate release, or they call it medical release in some cases. I like
Right.
the word compassionate release. So you have to identify the person who has the condition, then you have to evaluate them in terms of, is this a condition that meets the criteria for compassionate release, which means either it's a terminal illness or it's a condition in which the person is never going to get better,
Okay.
and is going to require a lot of care, basically. And if they meet those criteria, then the Department of Safety medical personnel have to sign off on it. Then it goes over to the parole board, and the parole board has a hearing, and they have to decide whether the person should be released or not. Because if the person, say, is terminal, but if the parole board determines that they are a danger to society, they're not going to release them no matter what their condition is. But they have to make a determination that this person is not a danger to the community and deserves compassionate release, deserves to be released because of their medical condition. Then the problem becomes, well, we're going to release them, but they require intensive medical care because they're dying. And so where
Right.
do we release them to?
Right.
And that is the problem. In the case of Delbert Joaquin Icona, we had a hearing before the parole board, and that is standard procedure with all medical release or compassionate release cases. We had the hearing, and the doctor testified by telephone from Halava, and he said that Delbert would die within 1 to 4 weeks.
Wow.
He was really at the end of it, I was actually worried, how are we going to get Delbert, into a home, because do we need an ambulance to pick him up at the prison door or what?
Right.
And as it turned out, that he looked pretty bad, but he was in a wheelchair, and he could stand up, and we got him out, and he got really wonderful care from a woman who decided she would care for him. She gave him great care, and he improved, and he lived for 2 more years, which is wonderful. But he did pass away.
Yep, I know he did. And that's just one of the many stories that you've worked on in these kind of situations. And there's other, and I wanted to bring this out, as each individual person, its case is a case in and of itself. It's, they don't relate to each other. And so there's what comes up is different issues with different diseases and ailments.
Right.
And so let's talk about a few of these here. Like, what happens, and if someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's, like, what is the procedure? Is it the same for everybody, or what is the state doing for somebody, especially when they get in those later stages of Alzheimer's, where
right? It could be Alzheimer's, which is a condition that carries a specific diagnosis, or it could just be early dementia.
Right.
But to me, as a layperson, not a doctor, I have trouble distinguishing between the two, because we do have those people in prison right now. I have been trying to help one for at least 2 years. I met with him.
Okay.
I asked him, I said, why are you here in prison? And he said, and this was his response, he said, because my son dropped me off here, and I'm waiting for him to come pick me up.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, haven't you been here for a long time, and because you murdered somebody? And he said, oh, I'd never do anything like that.
Oh,
And
man.
I mean, this person had no idea why he was in prison at this point in time. And he's in his mid 60s at this point. So it's early on, kind of an early onset for dementia and Alzheimer's. He has somebody who takes care of him in prison, his cellmate. But nobody wants him. I mean, he's got a murder conviction in his history. He's very peaceful now. He he doesn't know why he's in prison, and it's wrong, and I think morally, ethically wrong to keep him in this condition, under these circumstances, keep him in prison, wearing a striped suit and all the, all the deprivations that go with being in prison.
Right.
We need to get him out, but there's nowhere to put him, so he stays.
To make it more personal, my grandmother was diagnosed and she died from Alzheimer's, and I kind of, I'm familiar with the process that they go through. And what, kind of strikes me is, okay, so if he's not allowed to be let out because of his condition and what he did, and there's nobody that will take him, right?
Well, they're ready to let him out. I mean, the parole board has said, actually, he was paroled. And they had nowhere to put him. So they put him in a halfway house, which is a halfway house for drug addicts. And within a couple of days, he wandered away, and the police couldn't find him.
Right.
And the police found him at IHS, the Institute for Human Services, because that's a place where he knew. And they brought him back to prison as a parole violator because he was supposed to be in the halfway house. And I don't even believe to this day he's had a parole violation hearing, because everyone knows he's not even competent to help with his own defense.
Wow. Well, my point really was that, when my grandmother went into the hospice level of care, the cost of hospice level care is through the roof.
Yeah.
And so is the states willing to start paying for hospice level care, or are they just willing to let someone have the minimalist care as possible and he's just going to wither away?
Yeah, the state provides they have a contract with a hospice provider that comes into prison and provides services in prison. And to me, that's fine if you have somebody who you absolutely cannot let out, because even though they may be very sick, you consider them to be dangerous. And that is probably 1/100th of 1% of the people we're talking about. The average person, if they qualify for hospice and there's no imminent danger to anybody, we need to put those people, but they require a lot of care, then we need to put those people in a private hospice, but the state does not pay for that. So I was able to get one person out, and Hawaii Hospice took him as a charity case. We got him out. They put him they have a home over in Kailua, and it was really nice. He got really good care, and he only lasted 17 days. But which raises another problem, because when these people we need to diagnose these.
Well, we'll catch that next week.
Okay.
We have a break right now, Bob, so we'll be right back
with
you. Bob Merce. My name is Aaron Wills, and this is Rehabilitation Coming Soon. Thank you.
I'm Jay Fidel, and I'm the host of Research in Manoa, Mondays from 12 to 1 on thinktechhawaii.com. Take a look at us and learn about geophysics, learn about planetology, learn about the ocean and earth sciences at UH Manoa. You'll really enjoy it. So come around. We'll see you then.
Aloha. My name is Danelia, Danelia.
And I'm the other half of the duo, John Newman. Aloha.
We are the co-hosts of Keys to Success, which is live on the Think Tech live streaming network series, weeklies on Thursdays at 11 a.m.
Aloha, I'm Chantal Seville, the host of The Savvy Chick Show. You can watch the show every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Honolulu time and enjoy how to be inspired and empowered. If you're a woman or girl, everyone is welcome, but it's really dedicated to you. And we look forward to seeing you. You can also find us on thinktechhawaii.com. See you soon. Aloha.
Welcome back. This is Rehabilitation Coming Soon, and we're sitting here with our guest, Bob Merce, and we were just discussing hospice level care for an Alzheimer's patient, inside the prison system. And what we were discussing is the level of care. Let's say that the Alzheimer patient progresses to hospice level care. How much would that cost? Who bears the cost of that right now? And is there a better, cost alternative for the state to consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, for all of the compassionate release people or the medical release people, as long as they're in prison, the state pays on a fee-for-service basis for their care, unless the person is hospitalized. And now I think if they're hospitalized, the federal government will pay part of the hospitalization. But as soon as they come back into the prison system, then the state pays fee-for-service 100% of their medical care. So if you realize that somebody needs long-term care and needs nursing home care, for example, the sooner you get them out of the prison system and into a nursing home under Medicaid, where the state and the federal government share the cost of care, The state saves a huge amount of money by doing that. And by leaving people in, I'm trying to help somebody right now who is a veteran. He came out of the Vietnam War with a 70% service-related disability. He is entitled to nursing care home through the VA. We have one VA home here in Hawaii. It's on the Big Island. We applied, and they don't want to take him. And they've never given us a response in writing as to why they don't want to take him. But the CEO of a private, this particular one, there's a private company that runs a veterans home for the state. And the CEO of the company called me up and he said, we're not taking him because of his, quote, profile, meaning that, you know, he's committed murder. And even though this person could not possibly hurt anybody, he's totally 100% disabled. Essentially, the doctor said he's a functional quadriplegic, no movement from the neck down. The state of Hawaii is paying 100% of his care every single day, and he's been on parole for a couple of years. He's been paroled for a couple of years, but we can't. Parole is contingent on finding a place to put him. The veterans home doesn't want him, and so we continue to pay for him through state dollars instead of having the VA pay for all of his care. And that makes no sense.
Wow.
Financially, it makes no sense.
It's almost like it's like a building issue. Like we don't have the actual infrastructure here.
We don't.
Okay.
And you know, and I think to me the model is the state of Connecticut, where, you know, they realized what the problem was. They have a bigger population than we do, that's true, but they recognized what the problem was. They put out a request for proposals, something like $50 million, and they said, you know, we have prisoners who we want to house in a non-prison setting, and we've got people from our state hospital with serious medical and mental problems, and we need place for them. And a nursing home provider came in with a proposal, and they said, yeah, for that money, we will take a 95-bed hospital, we'll renovate it completely in a nice little community, and we'll take all of these people on Medicaid, you know, and so that's what they did, and that's working just fine. I mean, there was a big uproar, of course, in the community. They said, well, we don't want these people in our, you know, not in our backyard,
yeah.
but. You know, it's worked out really well as far as I can tell, and I've talked to some of the people from Connecticut who have been involved with it, and so now they have a routine. You know, if you see somebody who needs a nursing care home, you can get them out of the state system very quickly. You can get them into this, you know, privately run nursing home. They're there with other people who, you know, are like themselves, need a lot of care, and you know, it's not on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, in Hawaii, every single one of these compassionate release people becomes a case-by-case basis because we have nowhere to put them. There's no place to routinely to house these people. So you have to look at every option. Can we put them with a family? Can we put them in a nursing home? Can we put them in a state hospital? Where are we going to do? And that's not good. We need a comprehensive solution to this problem.
Well, with some of the cases that you've been talking about, you might be like the best person to ask this question. How much actually is it costing for like a year of care for one of these people?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know the actual number?
I don't. There's probably numbers out there, but I've never heard anybody. And I know in terms of the individuals that I've worked with, there's huge differences in the amount of care, because if you have end-stage liver disease, you can be functional for quite a while until the disease, you know, knocks you down, and those people then require. But everybody requires a lot of care at the end of their life if we're going to treat them, you know, humanely, and it's very expensive.
Well, and I know this case is kind of along the same lines, but let's talk about multiple sclerosis and you know, the kind of issues that having that disease and being in prison are going to present for somebody.
I mean, that's a disease that basically it's a progressive condition. People, you know, absent a miracle, they don't really get better. They continue to deteriorate.
So you could actually go into prison without having the symptoms, but while you're in it, it could develop and you could.
Yeah, one of the people that I'm trying to help right now is in that situation. He went in as a completely healthy person.
Oh, okay.
He's been in for 35 years, but he's been paroled since, I think, you know, for a number of years he's been paroled, contingent upon finding appropriate placement. But we can't find a place that wants to take him, because he has a murder conviction. And so if you have like a nursing home, And you know, our nursing homes, most of them have waiting lists. And so if you got a choice of who you're going to put in your nursing home, do you want to put somebody who has, you know, a criminal history of homicide in your nursing home, or you want to take somebody else? And that's why the state needs to do this. The private market is not going to solve this problem.
I see.
The state needs to get involved.
Yeah, especially with these kind of cases where, you know, he can't even move out of his bed.
No,
you know, I mean, the murder part of it, yes, that's part of his record, but this shouldn't go into evaluating whether he's actually violent at this point.
And in that particular case, excuse me, the state of Hawaii, the parole board has determined that number one, he served, you know, an appropriate amount of time for his crime, that he is appropriate to be released. He's not a danger to anybody. He's paid his debt to society, and we need to find a place for him. But we don't have a place for him. Oh. And as long as he's in prison, he needs to be fed he needs to be fed. He needs to be turned every 2 hours. He's got a catheter for his urine. You change the bed, he can't get out of bed. They put they put straps under him. They lift him up in a hoist. They change the bed. They drop him down. He never gets out of bed. He has no visitors. He has no entertainment, really. He's locked up every night in a cell. And that is absolutely wrong.
You know, and I just want to bring up this point too. I mean, you know, the state has a contract with CCA and to house prisoners. And if you're aware of how this contract works, basically CCA is allowed to cherry pick the prisoners away from the people who are going to have the major medical issues that's going to cost the care to go up.
Oh, and it was. You know, they have, like, I think, I've never been to this, you know, Saguaro, the CCA facility where most of the Hawaii prisoners are, but it's my understanding, and it may be wrong, but it's my understanding, they have very minimal medical facility there, kind of an infirmary. They send people out on an emergency basis to a local hospital, but as soon as they determine that somebody needs a lot of medical care, they're out. They're sending them out. And I've been told, and again, I don't have any facts on this, you know, I mean, I don't have it in black and white, but that, you know, that some people, I mean, how do you get them back to Hawaii if they're really sick? You know, you can't. So what do? Do you let them die in Saguaro without, you know, good medical care, or do you get an air ambulance and fly them back? And I've heard that you know, the billing for that is like $70,000, $80,000, you know, to bring one person back who is really sick. So, you know, big problem.
In the alternative, what has happened in some cases, and I have read this, is that, you know, a small injury such as a scratch on your arm will turn into something that causes someone to go into septic shock. This is written up in Civil Beat, this article.
Right.
And this person ended up having to have multiple amputations.
Right.
And it started off as a scratch.
Right.
And that just goes to show you how minimal level the medical care is. And from the record that was kept in this case, the guy complained about it the whole time. And he just did not receive the proper medical care, ended up having multiple amputations. And that's just one case. There's a lot of other ones like that.
Well, and you know, when you get somebody, if you give them a long sentence, and this ties in with your theme of mass incarceration, you know, you sentence somebody to 30, 40 years and they're 20 years old, they're going to age out. They're going to become old. In the world of compassionate release, generally, the general rule is that if your chronological age is 50, your medical age is probably about 60, because the people who end up becoming 50 years old in prison have probably never had good medical care throughout most of their life. They've been in prison for a long time, and so their medical condition is much worse than their chronological age. They get these diseases earlier, and we're not equipped to handle them. I mean, we aren't really equipped. I mean, prisons are not hospitals. Prisons are not nursing homes. And to try and care for these people in a prison setting is very difficult. And you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. And you know.
Well, and prisons aren't, you know, an environment for a healthy lifestyle living either.
No,
you know?
and you know, if somebody has been paroled, and then we're talking about people who have been paroled and who are still in prison today, despite having been paroled, because their parole is contingent on finding an appropriate place for them, and there's no place to put them. You generally can't put them with a family too, because, you know, if somebody is dying, A lot of these families are, they're poor families.
Yeah.
They don't have the room for these people. They don't have, the housing. They don't have
Yeah.
the ability to take care of them. So we need to put them in a facility of some kind. And nobody wants this class of people.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine someone who's, progressed in the Alzheimer's disease just getting dumped on you when you didn't have a time to adjust to them, and all the behaviors that go along with someone who's,
Oh, yeah.
progressing Alzheimer's is hard to control,
Right.
and it can put them in danger, and maybe even some members of your
Right.
family, and so you have to take that into consideration, and that's why, at some point you have to put them
Well,
under
and-
24-hour care.
Sure, and if you look at the rationale for putting somebody in prison, it's number one, rehabilitation, right?
Right.
Well, if they have Alzheimer's, they can't be rehabilitated.
Yeah,
They
that's
they
right.
don't have the mental ability. It's to to punish them, and they don't appreciate that that they've done anything wrong at that point. And so the rationale for putting somebody in prison in the first place just doesn't apply once somebody has Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we have covered, a lot of topics about compassionate release, and any closing thoughts on?
Well, number one, we need to reduce our prison population in Hawaii, period. That should be one of the legislators' top priorities. One way to do that is to get rid of these older people, put them in nursing homes, put them in places that are appropriate where they can get the care that they deserve and the care that they need if they're not dangerous. Don't keep them in our prison system. And we have to get a systematic way so we can take every one of these people and we know exactly where they're going to go based on their condition, and they can live out the rest of their days in some degree of peace and die in peace. That's what we need to do.
Well, these are great suggestions, and hopefully the state will be able to implement some of these suggestions because, as you say, it's not only costing them money, but it's inhumane.
Yes.
So, well, thank you, Bob, for taking your time out of your schedule
pleasure.
to be with us. And
Glad I could be here.
join us next week for another show of Rehabilitation Coming Soon as we continue our discussion of the criminal justice system and the effect of mass incarceration on the state of Hawaii. Stay tuned because coming up next is Sustainable Hawaii with Kirsten Turner. Thank you.